Hi there, it's Amanda, and welcome. So I have a bit of a confession. So as you know, when you're in school, there are books that you are required to read. You're assigned these books and usually have to do some sort of assignment related to them, whether it's like a book report, you'll get like a test or a quiz or some sort of open-ended question and answer type deal. This usually happens, for me, it was around middle school I started really getting required reading, and then in high school and college, of course. So I decided to make a video talking about the required reads that I lied about reading. So this means that I told my teacher that I read this book, maybe even did a report on it or took a quiz or some sort of test on it, and told them that I read it, but I actually didn't. Most of these books are books that I straight up just did not read, but a few of them are books that I kind of read but never finished and definitely don't know enough about to say that I've read them. This will be the first of a few videos that I'm going to do related to required reads. So again, here's my list of books that I was required to read but lied about reading. Disclaimer-ish type deal. So first I want to say I don't know why I didn't read these books, because at the time I was a reader. Like even when I wasn't reading Max, like I was still reading and I liked reading, and I don't necessarily have anything against required reading. I think it's fine. I think I was just kind of sucked into that whole like I don't want to read what I'm being told I have to read type of mentality, which I regret and wish that I never thought that way. But also I think like I just got bored with the books that I was being told I was supposed to read. So that's why I didn't read these, not for any other reason really, just like I just didn't. But I am gonna put a poll in the corner. I don't know which corner it is, but there will be a poll and you can vote on your favorite of these required reads that I lied about reading. I will for sure put at least one of them in my September TBR. So don't forget to vote, because I want to see what your favorite of these required reads are. Of course, I don't have most of these books, but whatever one that you vote for, I will get from the library for sure. So without further ado, let's get to the list. So the first book on my list is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. We actually partially listened to this in my 9th grade English class, but I didn't really pay attention, and we were supposed to do like required reading outside of there, and I just didn't. It was like a really weird time for me, and I just never actually read the book. Like I don't know anything about this book. I don't know what happened in the book. I don't know any of the characters. I just know that it was a very prominent book and a lot of people really like it. I'm very interested in it, and now I would like to read it, of course, but at the time I just didn't. The next book I'm going to talk about on the list is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. This was a summer reading requirement for me, and it was a really popular book. A lot of people I knew read it and loved it. I just didn't pick it up. Like I had other books that I did read that summer that were required reading, and I just never picked up The Kite Runner. I do have it somewhere. I just can't find it. Like I tore this place apart looking for it and I don't know where it is. Maybe I put it in a box somewhere. I'm not sure. I'm gonna keep looking for it, but it's definitely one that I want to read. I know people who don't even really like reading but just read it because they were supposed to and loved it. So I'm definitely interested in that. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Speak by Laurie Anderson. So this was another required read. It was like a summer read, and I knew that everybody loved it, and I knew there was a movie with Kristen Stewart, and I knew that I was probably going to love it, but I just never read it. It's some of my friends, it's like one of their favorite books. They're not really readers, but it's like one of the required readings that they read that really stuck with them, and I know that I would like it, and I've seen the movie, so I know the premise. Maybe I don't need to read it. Let me know what you thought about it and if it's worth reading when I've seen the movie and I've read literature similar to this before. The next book that I'm going to talk about is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I think in middle school it was one of my required reads and I just didn't read it. I don't know why. It's a loved book by many people, and Maya Angelou is a very loved human being, and I definitely want to read it. I don't have anything against it. I just didn't. So the next book that I pretended to read was Walden by Henry David Thoreau. My 11th grade English teacher was obsessed with Henry David Thoreau and Benjamin Franklin. Weirdly obsessed. Like I'm pretty sure there are books that I should have read in 11th grade that I didn't, because we spent so much time talking about these two humans. And like, okay, but also like, come on, Mrs. Eckert, what are you doing? So anyway, this was a book that she really wanted us to read, and like I read little parts of it, but I didn't really read it much. And I remember like not minding the parts that I read, but I was just not interested in the time, which like I keep saying, but that's like not a good excuse not to read a required read. I don't know, maybe. We'll see. I swear I read most of the books that I was supposed to read. So the next few books are books that I kind of read, that I read pieces of but didn't read enough of, or probably shouldn't have been taking like quizzes and tests on them. A lot of times I would just like spark note these books like beforehand, and that just doesn't count. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Beowulf. So this was in my AP English class, and we were required to read Beowulf, and we also read Grendel and had to learn all about that. And I can't remember why I didn't read this, because I know that I wanted to and I was planning on reading it, but I think we started analyzing it in class together, and I don't know if I missed that class for some reason. That year I had perfect attendance, so I don't know what was going on, but I really was not there for the beginning. I don't know if I had some sort of meeting or other obligation at that time, but I just did not read the first half of it. Kind of got the rest, but was confused and didn't really understand what was going on, and did my best to kind of catch up, but I didn't ever read the beginning. Almost half of it I think they were through by the time that I was included into that. So I'm not sure what was happening there, but that's that. The next book that I know why I didn't read, and it's not a good reason. This book is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. So I started reading this book, and as soon as I picked it up, I was annoyed. I remember thinking to myself, why would anybody burn books? That's what I thought to myself, was why are these people burning books? I don't want to read this. I don't like it. It doesn't make any sense. Even if you don't like books, leave it alone. So I kind of just didn't really read the rest. I read the little sections that were in class, but I don't know what happened. I don't really know anything about it. I know very small amounts, and I know there was just I think Hulu movie made about it with Michael B. Jordan, and I want to see the movie, and I know looking back that it would probably be a book that I really enjoy, knowing the cultural significance and understanding probably what was going on better and not just getting mad that they were burning books. So I think I definitely want to give Fahrenheit 451 a try, especially before I see the film. I think it's a film, not a show. So the next book that I'm going to talk about is I Have Lived 1,000 Years by Livia Bitton Jackson, I hope. So this is a novel about a young girl who grew up during the Holocaust. So I have read so many books about personal accounts during the Holocaust. Very important, of course. Yes, needs to happen. We should be reading books like that. But I think when I picked up this book, it was my last year going into high school, or my second to last year going into high school, and I had already been required to read so many Holocaust books. Not a problem. I'm not complaining. My problem was, I think when I got to this book, my thought process was, I know all of these specific accounts, and I know very specific details. I know more or less the timeline, right? From a certain point, but we never talk about what's actually happening. We know, of course, this awful thing, this terrible thing happened, and that 2/3 of Jewish people lost their lives, and many people that were Black or identified as being gay, they lost their lives in a very unjust and cruel and brutal way, right? And that's so important to talk about. But I was frustrated because I felt like what we never talked about was how it happened. We never talked about how it got from point A to the Holocaust. That was something that took time and took cultural and political moves. It took having specific ideals and thoughts pushed into a society little by little, enough just to make them overlook a whole series of injustices that built up and that were allowed to this bigger thing. And this kind of change in conversation about other humans and a target on specific humans that started off as something that people thought that they could overlook and grew into something bigger and ended up in 2/3 of this entire people dying. I didn't learn about it in that perspective until I was in college, and it bothered me. That's not an excuse for not reading this book, and I would still like to read this book, because I'm not trying to dismiss this book or any other book that deals with first accounts of the Holocaust, but it just bothered me that we never talked about more than just a timeline. You have to just know these dates, and this is not the way to teach history, because there was never any push for any analytical or critical thinking around the entire thing, right? So I wanted to know more about how that happened, and at this point I was annoyed with just dates and times being thrown at me and me not actually knowing anything about it. At the time that I was told to read this, I got into that mood. I was like, I want to know more. Like, I will read this, but you need to teach me more. By the time that I looked up, did my own research, and learned more about the actual culture of the Holocaust and how such a tragedy could happen, and also about all the ones that happened before and have continued to happen in other parts of the world, like, I decided to pick it up, having this other perspective and having this other knowledge. I picked it up and I got like halfway through or so, but then school started and then I got really busy and didn't finish. I would be willing to pick this up again. And the last book that I'm going to talk about was required for a class that I took on the prison industrial system. It was like a first-year freshman seminar at my college. That was Orange is the New Black by Piper Kerman. This was like a suggested read from my college. Like, going in, they suggested a book to read for incoming freshmen so that you would have something to talk about with the other people that were around you, which I actually really liked and thought that was cool. I did pick it up and I read the majority of it before I started the first year freshman seminar, but they were very clear that you didn't have to. It was just going to be about the prison industrial system. And of course, like, this book isn't even really accurate to it. And then of course they've made a show about it, which is nothing like this book. It's very, very different. And it has kind of turned into something obviously its own thing, but this was a true story about her Piper's experience. Obviously it is not accurate representation of how non-white women experience the system. The class was mostly about systematic racism and how our culture has built the prison industrial system to maintain racism and slavery. That was like the focus of the class. It wasn't even really about this book. It was just a suggested read because that's what we would be talking about. It was a fascinating class and I loved it so much and I learned so much and I'm very grateful for it. I don't know if I even want to read this book just because there are so many other books that I could read that would, I think, do better. For example, there's a book called The New Jim Crow. That is a book that I really want to read and I will be getting from the library soon. You know, there are other references that I could get to learn more about the prison industrial system and more about the systemic racism in our culture specifically, as well as across the world, of course. So on that note, that was my list of required reads that I lied about reading. Please let me know down below if there are any books that you were required to read in school but didn't. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I will be making more videos kind of related to this, so keep a lookout for those. I have social media that is linked below if you want to interact with me and talk to me on those platforms. If you would like, you can go ahead and subscribe and like and all that. That's fine. That sounds great. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful whatever time, whatever day you are watching this, and I will see you very soon. Bye!